They said she was too fat to dance, too plain to wed. And in a town that measured beauty by how much dust a man would kick up to see your smile, Martha Clay was invisible. But not to everyone. Because one man, a stranger with scars no one dared to ask about, saw her long before she believed she could be seen. It was 1879, in a small town called Sutter's Bend, tucked between two ridges and a river that dried more often than it flowed. The air smelled of sweat, whiskey, and regret, the kind that clings to lonely men and hungry women. Martha worked in Clay's boarding house, which wasn't much more than a weather-beaten shack with a crooked sign. Her father had built it before he drank himself to death. Now it was hers, and hers alone. She cooked, cleaned, and kept to herself. Her figure, broad, strong, shaped by labor, made her a target for every cruel whisper and snickering boy who passed. The fat girl behind the counter, they called her, the one who covers her face, because she did. After her mother's death, Martha had taken to wearing a burlap sack, a thin veil with 2 cut-out holes, tied behind her head like a hood. She said it kept the dust out, but everyone knew it was shame she was hiding from, not dust. Then came the stranger. He arrived one autumn evening, just as the sky turned the color of fire and blood. His horse was worn thin, his hat pulled low, his hands scarred and trembling. He asked for a room, paid double, no questions. Name was Jonas Hale, though he didn't say it until days later. For a week he barely spoke, sat alone at the far table, eating in silence while the others laughed and gossiped. Every so often, his eyes drifted toward Martha, not in judgment, but with the kind of look that feels like understanding. One night, the lamp oil ran low, and Martha stayed up refilling it. The other boarders had gone to bed. Jonas sat in the corner, nursing a cup of cold coffee. He watched her move through the dim light, the sack still over her face. Finally, his voice broke the quiet. "Do you wear that because of them?" he asked softly, "or because of you?" The question struck her like thunder, just nodded once and said either way. "You don't owe them anything." Then he stood, tipped his hat, and went upstairs. That night she couldn't sleep. His words replayed in her mind, cutting through years of silence. "You don't owe them anything." The next morning, she found him mending the fence behind the boarding house. His coat was off, his sleeves rolled, his hands steady, despite the old burn marks that covered one arm. She wanted to ask what had happened, what story those scars told, but she didn't. Instead, she handed him a tin cup of coffee. No one had called her Miss Clay in years. Over the weeks that followed, something quiet began to grow between them, a kindness made of shared silences, the kind that doesn't need words to feel true. Jonas never laughed at her. When she spoke, he listened, really listened. And slowly the air around her began to change. One night, during the town's harvest dance, Martha stood by the window, listening to the fiddle cry from across the street. She'd never been invited. She never expected to be. But as the music swelled, she saw Jonas step through the door of the saloon. He looked out across the crowd, then up toward her window. For a moment their eyes met, his full of quiet invitation. She almost went. Almost, but fear won, as it always had. She stayed behind the glass until the lamps burned out. The next morning, the town was buzzing, not about the dance, but about the news. Jonas Hale was gone, left before sunrise. No note, no goodbye. Well, just an empty room and a few coins left on the dresser. Martha didn't cry. But for the first time since she could remember, she wished someone had stayed. Winter came hard that year. One night, while mending a roof leak, Martha found something wedged under the loose floorboard in Jonas's old room. It wasn't addressed to her, but to whoever was still there. She opened it with trembling hands. "If you find this, I've gone to finish something I should have ended long ago. There's a woman out there, a widow I wronged. A fire took my home, my family, and I ran instead of saving them. The town called me a coward, and maybe they were right. I wear these scars to remember. But lately I've wondered if remembering isn't the same as never forgiving yourself. If I don't come back, tell the woman in the burlap sack. She's more seen than she'll ever know." Martha read those words until the ink blurred. She had just folded the letter and kept it in her apron pocket, near her heart. Months passed, the snow melted. Spring bloomed over the valley, and the river finally flowed again. Then, one evening, as she was closing up, a shadow crossed the door. Jonas Hale stood there, gaunt, exhausted, but alive. His left arm hung limp, his eyes weary. Martha froze. The sack still hung over her face, her heart pounding beneath it. He stepped forward, his voice rough with emotion. "Kept the place running," he said softly. "I wasn't sure I'd see you again." She couldn't find words. He reached into his pocket, pulling out something small, a tin locket, dented and scratched. "I buried my past," he said, "and I came back for my future." Then, without another word, he reached up and removed the sack from her face. No one had ever done that. For a long moment, they just stood there, the light of the lantern flickering between them. She wasn't beautiful by the world's measure, but in that light, she was more than that. She was real. Jonas looked at her the way a man looks at the first sunrise after a long winter. "You don't need to hide anymore," he whispered. And then, almost shyly, he knelt down, took her rough, trembling hand in his, and said, "Miss Clay, would you walk beside me from here on out? Not marry me, not be mine, just walk beside me." And she nodded, tears falling freely now, not from shame, but from finally being seen. They say the sack still hangs in the window of the old boarding house, tattered by time. Some say Martha left it there as a reminder that no face, no body, no past should ever be hidden in shame. Because sometimes love doesn't come dressed in beauty or wealth. It comes quietly, like a lantern carried through the dark, by someone brave enough to look beyond what the world sees. And that's how Martha Clay's story ended, not with applause or a wedding march, but with two souls who learned that being seen is the rarest kind of love. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Wild Tales Storytelling, where every whisper of the past still echoes with love, loss, and the wild spirit of the human soul.